Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everybody. It's not payday, but you are in fact listening to the PayDay Podcast with your host, me, Samantha Mantra. And guess what, y'all? This is our 1-year anniversary episode. This baby podcast is officially out of diapers. And my oh my, do I have a special episode for you. You're going to get some sneak peeks. And I, of course, will serve you my consistent flavor of honesty. First things first, I want to give a huge thank you to anyone who's listened to this podcast in the past year. Thank you to my clients who took a chance on my new professional service that is now going on to be 2 years old, and to my community and my friends who have consistently gifted me with kindness during these nonsensical times that we are living through. I want to talk to y'all, because it's my anniversary episode, about why I even decided to make a podcast. I know it's a super popular and cliche thing to do. I made a podcast because I kept having the same conversations with different people daily. This is stretching back 5, 6, 7 years now. I would explain the same things. I would talk about the same things. And every time folks would look at me like I had, perhaps my hair had changed color, like I had gone Super Saiyan. I just wanted folks to understand how their money worked for them. And apparently they weren't aware that it could. They just thought that they worked to earn money. And it is in fact the other way around as soon as you start breaking even. And I want everyone to have access to that information. So longer story short, I created a podcast where you can replay me talking through any tips, tricks, concepts, and I have scripted out a whole season. Now, as a lot of other folks had this experience, 2021 was almost more difficult than 2020 because 2021 was when we all realized, oh, this isn't going to be over with a vaccine. And I had to scale back my production because I am one woman. And like a lot of other folks, I work 2 jobs. All this to say, I appreciate you, everyone who understood and was patient with me as I took a couple of months off of the podcast to get my life right side up again. And now that things are a little bit tidier in that department, we have 9 fully produced episodes. There are 5 more episodes coming your way that will complete season 1. And I want to take this anniversary episode to give you all a little bit of a sneak peek on what I have planned. Our next episode, episode 10, is going to talk to you about how we're going to defeat scarcity mindset. Scarcity mindset is going to be talked about from a biological, scientific, psychological, less of a Instagrammy woo-woo approach. Like, this is science. There's reasons why mindsets are what they are, and it really affects how we filter through our money. How do we defeat scarcity mindset? How do we evaluate our options and not operate from a default assumption that everything will always be terrible, especially when reality feels like it might always be terrible? The episode after that, episode 11, is going to be on thriving, the opposite of scarcity, thriving, growth, abundance, this beautiful word that none of us have had enough of, peace. What does that look like? What would allowing yourself to thrive cost you? And how do we afford that as soon as possible? Then episode after that will be on a doozy of a subject, but we're going to specifically narrow in on a moment with debt. Now, everyone, or it feels like most of us, carry some form of debt. But we're going to talk about debt and denial, and how denial and debt are linked to some of our survival instincts working against our best intentions. And we're going to round out the season with a good, deep explanation of the emergency fund and the buffer fund. It really blows my mind that people disagree on how to calculate an emergency fund. I feel like that's like disagreeing how addition should work. We can't disagree that 1 + 1 is 2. 1 plus 1 is not 11. And so I'm going to talk about it. How do we calculate an emergency fund? How can you do it easily for yourself? And by the way, what the heck is a buffer fund and why do you need one? All of that will be covered in the last episode that will round out our season. Now, you may have noticed, if you were counting, that I only listed 4 topics. Episode 13, which is going to be between denial and debt and the emergency fund and the buffer fund, is going to be a very special episode dedicated to everybody who's been making it by themselves. It's called No Support. It is dedicated to all of my younger Gen Z cousins or my millennial peers who have made it with just no support. Nothing. There was no parental support. There was no financial support. They have made their way in the world and they need to know things. And so I will spend that episode talking to you, the listener, as if you are my baby cuz and I had some things to tell you so that you could stack up as quickly as possible and spend less time stressing and fretting. Phew, that's a lot of topics. That is what will round out season 1. Season 2 is going to have more series information. So honestly, 15 minutes is a lot of time when you're podcasting on this side, but not a lot of time necessarily when you're listening. And some of the topics of personal finance, most of them, deserve a lot of love. And so in season 2, we're going to get into serialized episodes. Basically, there will be a part 1 and part 2 and part 3, and sometimes even a part 4 and 5. For example, we're going to get into debt in a serious way in season 2. We're going to talk about student loans, consumer debt, healthcare. We're going to talk about the cost of a lot of different things. We're going to dive deeper into some of these topics. The cost of adulthood. Why does it feel like it costs to breathe some days? We're going to go back to the bills and we're going to really assess them. We're going to start approaching our financial institutions for the products that they are. And we're going to really talk about what happens when your debt is the asset for someone else, but you are running a consistent deficit. And that means we're going to continue to touch on some topics that are going to make you feel some type of way. For my folks who are here for career advice and not just for money knowledge, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. It's simply that this labor market takes no prisoners. It is going to be an intense and whirlwind discussion on how we establish our value, how we talk about our value as employees, and what we will and will not tolerate in exchange for compensation moving forward as employers finally raise their wages after literal decades of paying people less than the cost of living. And that and a lot more will be coming to you in season 2, which will actually be, fingers crossed, within this calendar year. And since season 2 is not yet 100% scripted, if there is a money or career topic you would like me to dive into, do some research, figure out some best practices, and let y'all know right here on the podcast, now is the time to slide into my DMs. At Samantha_mantra, same username on both Instagram and Twitter. Let me know what's really on your mind. Let me know what you're having trouble figuring out. And maybe, just maybe, your question and query will make it into a podcast episode. Another thing that I want to let you all know that will be coming out more in 2022 is there is a blog on SamanthaMantra.com. People have to digest information in the way that is most automatic to your brain. That has been both my professional experience and my personal experience. And so for my folks who are auditory in nature, you might find podcasts are your jam. For my folks who are more visual, they will gravitate more to social media, visual items. And for my folks who are old school natural readers, like myself, perhaps you'd prefer to read more in-depth writing on the subject. And you will be able to find that this year over on SamanthaMantra.com, because there is no shortage of topics that we could dive into and talk about. I also want to let you know that I am looking for sponsors. And so if you think that there is a great company or organization that would like to sponsor the podcast and we might be a good fit, feel free to mention them to me in my DMs. Starting this podcast was 3 things at the same time. It was an exercise in pushing myself professionally. Could I communicate clearly to people who don't know me? it is a business venture, something that I hope that will, one, benefit people, make your life easier. Speaking of ways to make your life easier, if you're getting ready to start a podcast and you haven't heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to get started. It's free. Anchor distributes your podcast for you across multiple platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Their app allows you to edit straight from your phone or computer, and there's no minimum listenership to start earning revenue. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And also, make me money. Honesty, right? Transparency. Businesses are services in exchange for money. And lastly, it's a bit of a labor of love. I truly do want to make our lives easier, and I want us to spend less time Googling, searching, looking for information, and hopefully this podcast will cover a lot of things that I can research for you that will give you back time. And hopefully it's just a pleasant part of you getting your morning coffee as your direct deposit slides into your checking account, and you could do a little happy dance and say, I got paid today. Because payday should be celebrated, even once we're past the point of being broke. You should celebrate, even if it's just with a dance and a hot cup of coffee, moments where you get rewarded for the work that you put in. Compensation, right? So, even though it's not payday, I am wishing y'all a smooth transition to your next payday. This is Samantha Mantra, signing off. I'll talk to y'all soon.